in the high desert in the great American Southwest.
Welcome to Coast AM. John, welcome to the program. It's good to have you with us. You're with us.
Welcome back to Coast PM, the number one unofficial Coast AM podcast, where it is all conspiracy all the time. My name is Paul. I am the guy that listens to the madness of a radio show that is Coast AM, here with my brother.
Hey, it's Chris here. I'm the Carol Baskins to your Joe Exotic, except I didn't kill my husband.
I was not expecting that one. That came out of left field.
I want to keep you on your toes on these ones, dude.
This is probably one of my favorite parts of the show so far is seeing what you come up with for these buddy comedy duos. Tiger King was not on the list.
Tiger King wasn't on your list?
It was not.
All right, well, I'll keep them. Well, you know, some of the great duos were actually against each other.
That's true. That's true.
So, and sometimes, we butt heads.
We are brothers. I think it's
fighting that
needed.
Has to happen.
It's needed.
Somebody has to defend these conspiracies and paranormal activity.
It's true. Someone has to, including everyone that is on this radio show. But yes. Chris,
what do you got for me today?
We're doing something that I would call real. Something that actually happened. Today we are going to be talking about the Coast to Coast AM episode hosted by George Knapp in June of 2022 about the
another
Edgewood
George
Experiments.
Knapp. Dude, we gotta stop going to George Knapp all the time, man.
He's got good ones lately. But this is about the Edgewood Experiments.
Yeah.
So the Edgewood Experiments are where U.S. soldiers were experimented on with highly hallucinogenic chemical compounds.
All right. So this is like the MKULTRA LSD experiments, but a little bit different.
A little different, and in some scenarios even worse, because they're being given compounds that made them hallucinate for days or weeks at a time.
Okay.
Which is
Got
brutal.
It. Wow.
So
a hell of a hallucinogen.
Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting episode today. But before we get into any of that, we have to check in with Tim Bonall. At the Coast to Coast AM blog.
Yeah, blog. The blogosphere. The blogosphere.
All right. So this one, Chris, I think this is a great follow-up for our recent Bigfoot episode.
Oh, yes.
Oklahoma man blames Bigfoot summoning for alleged murder of fishing buddy.
I saw this one on the internet.
Did you see this one?
This is the first one that I've actually seen out in the wild.
Yeah, this was a big one. This was a big one.
I didn't click on it, but the title did get an extra reread.
Like, excuse me,
as I was scrolling past.
Well, it was a little confusing by the title, because when I first read it, I thought the man was claiming Bigfoot killed his friend.
No. I understood it to be like a Son of Sam. The dog told me to kill everyone. This is Bigfoot told me to kill my friend.
So slightly different.
Oh, okay.
Slightly different. So let's get into this story.
Yeah, get into the story.
Going to be a plot twist.
It's not just a fisherman. He was like a noodler, right? Which, for those of you who don't know what noodling is, that's where you take your arm, put it into a log under the water in order to catch a giant catfish on your arm.
For those of us who weren't raised in Arkansas, that's exactly what noodling is.
That is what noodling is, also known as hogging.
Hogging's my preferred nomenclature is actually hogging.
Is hogging.
Yeah, for this. So in a bizarre story out of Oklahoma, a man arrested for allegedly killing his friend during a fishing trip told police that the deadly incident came about in response to his companion summoning Bigfoot to attack him. According to a local media report, the very weird case occurred this past Saturday afternoon near the city of Ada, as Larry Sanders and Jimmy Knighton were attempting to catch catfish in the South Canadian River by way of their bare hands using a technique known as noodling. However, their day took a dark turn when the two fishing buddies got into a disagreement, which ultimately left Knighton dead and Sanders pointing the finger at Sasquatch.
So just hold up a second. We didn't hear anything about summoning Sasquatch in our previous episode.
We did not.
Are there's rituals one can do to bring Sasquatch to you.
I would say in the mind of this man, there was a ritual that his friend was doing to bring Sasquatch. I haven't heard anyone say that.
We're kind of mixing a couple of shows. You're kind of mixing a little bit of Harlot the Witch with our Sasquatch episode. You know, it's like summoning the being to you.
It's all about building a narrative thread throughout all the episodes of this show, Chris.
Yes.
That's the beauty of it. So
all conspiracy is connected.
It's one big umbrella.
It's just where is that connective tissue, right?
And we're finding it today.
Okay, keep going.
So, responding to a report of a homicide that had unfolded at the river, police say that they arrived to find Sanders recounting his role in Knighton's death to a family member. Upon being questioned by deputies at the scene, the noodler confessed to killing his best friend by first striking him and then strangling him. As for why he did it, Sanders shockingly explained that Knighton had summoned Bigfoot to come and kill him. And in order to save his own life, the man concluded that he had to silence his companion before the proverbial call to action reached the ears of Sasquatch. In what might be the least surprising aspect of the case, police also observed that Sanders, quote, appeared to be under the influence of something.
Yeah, that's a no duh, dude. You know, what's funny is that this guy probably thought at the time that was totally going to get him off. No, listen, officer, it was self-defense. This guy had Bigfoot after me.
He was summoning Bigfoot to kill me.
This Bigfoot was going to kill me, so I had to kill him first.
Oh, man. What do you think he thought the cops were going to say? Like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, man. Yeah, my buddy tried to summon Bigfoot against me once.
I would have done the same thing.
I would have done the same exact thing. All right, what else do we got? Is there more to the story?
There's more. So while the misguided measure of self-defense appears to have worked since he was not killed by Bigfoot, that's one way of putting it, Sanders was subsequently arrested for Knighton's murder after police recovered the downed noodler's body from the river the following day.
As should have happened. Like, this man needs to be in prison, probably in solitary confinement for a little bit.
I think he needs to. Well, okay, he may not actually have mental health issues. He may have just been on drugs. This sounds like he was on drugs.
This may be those crazy hallucinogenics that we're about to talk about.
He could have been on LSD or BC from the CIA. Maybe did MKUltra ever shut down? We don't know. Musing that the man's forthcoming nature makes it easier to prosecute the case, Sheriff John Christian indicated that, quote, you still have to prove all the elements of the crime and that what the suspect is telling you is actually what happened. Since it is unlikely that Sanders will be able to find Bigfoot to testify on his behalf, he's likely facing an uphill legal battle in which, if he is found guilty, could ironically culminate with him facing the death penalty for the Sasquatch-inspired slaying.
A little bit of humor thrown in there from Timmy Banal, dude.
Yeah, a little tongue-in-cheek. Just a little.
Tongue-in-cheek. Probably not going to find that Bigfoot.
Since you're probably not going to get Bigfoot to testify for you, you're probably screwed.
Can you imagine, though? I mean, just in like the alternate universe, right? Where Bigfoot is a part of our society, the Bigfoot on the testifying on the stand being like, he did summon me, officer. And I was going to kill him. But since he killed his friend first, the summoning was no longer appropriate, and so I'd no longer have to kill this man.
And then then the judge starts banging his gavel and just yelling not guilty.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the dream. Yeah,
dude. Yeah, we need to get like a Law and Order episode out of this, I think.
Dun, dun, dun. Well, Chris, I think it's a little time to jump into Project Edgewood.
Project Edgewood, dude. Always got to put a project name on this.
Yeah, it makes it sound a little cooler, a little flair.
It's always some kind of project.
So on this episode, George Knapp is interviewing two filmmakers by the name of Nick Bridgeton and Reed Kirby.
All right.
And they made the film Dr. Delirium and the Edgewood Experiments.
Dr. Delirium. That's a good, like, evil genius name, dude.
It's a pretty good name. And I actually did watch this documentary. It is available.
It good?
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's available on Discovery Plus. So in terms of what the Edgewood Experience were, as just a quick overview, the Edgewood Arsenal human experiments occurred between 1948 and 1945 at the Edgewood facility that's in Maryland. So these are
wait. That doesn't make any sense. 1948 to 1945.
Sorry, 1948 to 1975.
Okay.
It's early in the morning. I misspoke.
The hallucinogenics are so strong, they went back in time.
We usually record this in the evening. We're recording this in the morning, so I'm a little thrown off. So these are well-documented and videotaped human experiments around the concept of psychochemical warfare. So everything that we're talking about today, we have the videotapes. You can find them on YouTube.
We have the document proof.
And we have the document proof. Yeah.
This Project Edgewood, 100% real.
And the man who ran the facility and was in charge of these experiments is on record. He's done interviews about this.
Dr. Delirium himself.
Dr. Delirium himself. He was subpoenaed for a civil case about this, and he's on the record about everything that went down.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Oh man, did you love when the conspiracy becomes real?
Yeah, and unlike MKUltra, which MKUltra, the guy who's running that, destroyed all the documentation, Dr. Ketchum, who was the one running Edgewood, saved all the documents.
Dr. Ketchum, also Dr. Delirium.
Yes, and he believed in what he did until the day that he died.
Right. He was like, I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So in these experiments,
is this guy an ex-Nazi?
No,
but
no spoilers, Chris. We'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
No spoilers.
My immediate thought when we have any kind of psychotropics and the military, my immediate thought is always, this dude's a Nazi.
One of the audio clips we have, I just put Nazis in all caps. So we will get to the Nazis. We'll get to LSD. We'll get to PCP. But before all that, so this was where 7,200 soldiers were experimented on with 250 different chemicals.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So this included PCP, LSD, sarin gas.
Oh my God.
Mustard gas, various other nerve agents, and then also caffeine, alcohol, and weed.
Right, the classics.
So the last three was probably.
I've been experimenting with those for quite some time.
98% of this was a hellscape, and then like 2% was like kicking back with your buddies, I think.
My God, dude, I would have loved to. Like, I'll be the marijuana, caffeine, nicotine guy.
Yeah, can I just smoke cigarettes and drink beer? Is that cool?
Yeah,
for science.
Can I be that guy? Yeah, you can watch me do that.
So let's kick this off, Chris.
What is BZ?
We're going to get into it.
Okay.
That is a special chemical. There's no street equivalent to it because no one in their right mind would ever take it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So let's jump into this. Right. So what was Edgewood? Right. How did it come about?
Yeah.
And I started researching the experiments that were conducted at Edgewood, and it was shocking to me. What was most shocking is that not only did the Army experiment with highly potent mind-altering drugs on our own soldiers, but they filmed these experiments as well.
The First World War was the chemists' war, and the United States mobilized industry and science to deal with chemical warfare in the battlefield. And after the war, all of those efforts consolidated at Edgewood Arsenal, which was the primary manufacturing site during the First World War.
So Edgewood had been around for a while as a chemical manufacturer.
Well, like the DuPont chemical and stuff like that, that's where they got their start, I believe, was World War I, and really came into fruition during World War II.
Yeah.
And there's like a lot of weird stuff around the DuPonts and the military industrial complex.
Dude, can't trust chemical manufacturers. I've always said that.
No.
Not good.
Not good.
They're never doing anything good for the world.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All right. Okay. So what else do we got?
Yeah. So we got this old chemical manufacturing arsenal, right?
Yeah.
And really what the documentarians trying to do is, number one, put this in the context of the Cold War. So why is it that we are experimenting on our soldiers in this way?
Yeah. Well, the key thing here is you do have to look at this through the lens of nuclear warfare, because the alternative to using psychochemicals or any incapacitating chemical was tactical nuclear weapons. And the problem with that, of course, was that would escalate very quickly to an all-out nuclear war. This was an attractive option, an alternative to using nuclear weapons.
So essentially what he's saying here, I don't think he's being incredibly clear, but in the battlefield, if we were in a situation where we had to engage with the Soviets, if we started firing shots, then the likelihood of nuclear war was incredibly high. But if we used an incapacitating agent instead of actually killing their soldiers, that is a way of kind of being able to potentially de-escalate a situation with very limited damage to the other side.
Yeah, this is the classic Alex Jones, they're turning the freaking frogs gay.
Yeah.
Right. Where you come up with some kind of chemical that, lowers the testosterone in men or things like that. They're coming up with alternatives to conventional warfare.
Yeah. So in that context, this is where it started as what seems like maybe a good idea, like how do we not kill people, but they ended up severely damaging a lot of U.S. soldiers, which is
our own people.
Yeah,
we incapacitated our own people. 7,200 soldiers is a ton of people. That's insane.
It's a lot of people, and they were not actually aware of what was being tested on them. So
really?
Yeah, although they were volunteers, they did not know what was actually going to happen.
What they were volunteering for.
Which
classic military.
Classic military. And the thing with this program, Chris, it went all the way to the top with Mr. Eisenhower.
Mr. Eisenhower.
Eisenhower was briefed on this National Security Council meeting on a concept called controlled temporary incapacitation. And this is where the ideas of using incapacitating chemical biological weapons was presented to him. And he said it was a splendid idea. After that, there were crash programs to deliver weapons as soon as possible for limited warfare.
So Eisenhower loved it.
I like Ike. You like Ike. Everybody likes Ike for president, huh?
Yes, indeed.
Wow. But, I can see on that top level where you would be like, yeah, this would keep us from having a nuclear exchange. This would stop us from, these conventional warfare methods where hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have to die. He's probably not getting the rough specifics of the experiments, right? He has an advisor come to him and be like, oh, we're going to do experiments on, lessening the testosterone. And
you're really on this T level thing.
Well, they're doing it, dude. Look, there's microplastics in all of us.
Yeah, there's other reasons for that, Chris. But yeah, I agree that there are microplastics everywhere. Yeah, that's it. They're after our testosterone for sure. But yeah, so in along with this too, it was a bit of a chemical warfare arms race, at least in the US's eyes, because we were afraid of falling behind. We were afraid of what Russia had, but also what China had, because apparently China was buying up a shit ton of LSD.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of concern when China bought up almost the entire commercial supply of LSD at one time.
How much was that? How much did they buy?
It was roughly equivalent to what would be needed to attack a square kilometer.
They got a square kilometer worth of LSD.
Oh my God, dude!
China bought all the LSD in the world.
Yeah, they're like, we like some LSD. Yeah, how much you want? All of it.
Give me every bit of LSD.
Give me all of it. What the heck were they going to do with that?
They were probably doing what we were doing, experimenting on their people with it.
Right. Well, and you had the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, who was especially at this time, at war with the nationalists.
Yeah.
And then this is like the creation of Taiwan is happening right now, with, was it Chiang Kai-shek or something like that? Mm-hmm. So you're right. They were probably using it as a truth serum against the nationalists.
Yeah. Which was initially how we thought we would use it as a truth serum. And then it turns out that's not how LSD works.
Not really. Yeah, dude. Tripping balls, not necessarily the best information you get out of those people.
Yeah, very true. So question number one, like, let's get into the nuts and bolts of this, right? So how did they get people to show up for this program? Because this program was really shitty.
They said, hey, you want unlimited caffeine, marijuana, and cigarettes?
You want to drink some beer with your boys for a week or two?
Yeah.
Well, they said that this was a contribution to our national security. Someone would come to their base and do a talk about this volunteer program, and from the vet's point of view, this was a plum assignment. They had weekends off, no KP duty, and they would be testing protective clothing, equipment. Again, from the vet's point of view, there was no drugs mentioned.
So they literally had no idea they were about to get drugged.
Oh my God, dude. So this is the lesson that you need to get from this listener. Do not volunteer if you are in the military for anything.
Just say
Never
no.
volunteer.
Say
Keep
no.
your head down and do what you're told. Do not volunteer.
Stay with your, if a cush job comes up, probably not cush.
Yeah, it's never cush.
It's never cush.
It's never cush.
But that's the thing, like from these guys' perspectives, especially some of the soldiers, because they interviewed them for the documentary, they were like, they never thought that their government would lie to them. They were all in on the U.S. government. And this was before people learned to not trust the government.
This
after
is the
we
50s.
found out.
This is the 50s, dude. We're right off of winning World War II. The median income throughout the country is skyrocketing. Everyone has their 2.2 children, their white picket fence. Well, not everybody, but you get what I'm saying. Why would you not trust your government?
Yeah, this was when trust of institutions was at a near all-time high in America.
I think this is the all-time high.
Yeah. So these guys were like, the military wants us to go and do this, test some gear. That sounds awesome. And we get to just kind of hang out. And like I said, they were not ever told what they were exposed to. Not at any point, even afterwards, did they know.
Even while they're getting exposed to it.
Even while
they
they're getting
don't know
exposed to it.
what they're getting exposed to.
Or what the potential effects could be.
Wow.
And even before that they were administered the drugs, they were not told that the possible effects of these drugs. Now, the secrecy was paramount because this is a highly classified program. But what we explored in the documentary is exactly why these soldiers, these veterans, were kept under this secrecy oath for 50 years after the Edgewood experiments ended.
So essentially what happened was they were given these drugs, many of which, like I said, don't have street versions. They're just really potent chemical compounds that really mess with these guys' brains.
Right.
And, they're 60, 70 years old now, having nightly night terrors.
Yeah.
Like their brains are still broken from this stuff. And when they go to their doctor, they can't tell their doctor what's wrong with them or what happened to them.
That's insane. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was given some insane. Well, and that's the thing. They couldn't even tell the doctor what it was that they were given.
Yeah. Because, well, number one, they didn't know. And then number two, they couldn't tell their doctor that they were drugs because of this. Now, this has since changed because of a civil suit. But what had happened was they were trapped in a catch-22 for decades of they couldn't tell their doctor what had happened. But without telling their doctor what had occurred to them, they couldn't get VA benefits. But without stating what had, if they do state what had happened, then they can't get VA benefits because they broke their secrecy agreement.
Dude, it's unbelievable how shitty the upper echelons of our military industrial complex is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Terrible.
it's awful. Like, if you would have just given these people medical benefits, it doesn't make it better that you did these wild experiments on them, but at least, that's the very least you could have done.
Yeah, is take care of them or tell them what happened so that they could seek treatment. But they couldn't seek treatment at all without being faced with 20 years in a military prison.
It's like the 9/11 first responders. It's like, just give these people medical care.
Yeah. Just
what are we fighting about? We can send $40 billion to Ukraine, but we can't spend $500 million making sure that the people who saved, lives on a national tragedy get health care. Dude, we live in a messed up government, dude.
Yeah, it's not great.
These people are sociopaths.
And this is one of the things that the group really wanted to figure out when they're making this documentary is why was this kept so secret, right? Because there were the atomic vets, and those were the guys who were working on nuclear test sites, and they had a similar issue, but eventually they were able to get treatment. But these guys that were at Edgewood still weren't able to. Everything was still classified for a really long time, up until about a decade ago, when they finally won a civil suit. But
it was that recent.
It was
within
that
the
recent.
last decade.
Yes, that they finally won a civil suit where they could tell their doctor what happened to get treatment for it.
And so these guys are all in like their 70s.
Yeah, these guys are all in their 70s.
60s,
One of them,
70s.
Yeah, and it's terrible what happened to him. One of the guys was talking about how every night he has such terrible night terrors that he chases his wife out of the bedroom on a nightly basis.
God, that poor
like
woman.
Yeah, it has really scarred their brains permanently, which is what happens when you are given a hallucinogenic compound that lasts for days.
Right.
You know, but the question is, why was the government so insistent on keeping this a secret, right?
Testing experimental, highly potent chemical agents, mind-altering drugs on our soldiers is one thing, but there was other levels of the Edgewood program that we discovered in the documentary, which we explored, which had to do with some of the CIA involvement in the Edgewood Experiments.
So they actually found that the CIA was involved with Edgewood.
Of course they were. Of course they were. Why wouldn't they be?
But here's the thing, Chris.
If it's unbelievably evil, the CIA has their hand in it.
So this was happening at the exact same time as MKUltra, like we had said before.
Absolutely. When the experiments did end in Edgewood in 1975, this is the same time that the CIA's MKUltra project came out, and these were horrendous experiments conducted on civilians and on also military personnel.
And this was documented in court during the civil case where the soldiers were suing to have the right to tell their doctor what happened to them and to have their documents released. It was shown that the CIA was sending money to Edgewood. Exactly why, no one would testify to, but the CIA was documented to be involved with this experiment.
Because they're evil bastards. Like, I don't need an explanation as why. They saw something that they could eventually use against people for whatever reason, dude, just to torture people. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, these sickos just need, that's all they need. It's like, oh, this is really bad for people. Here's a bunch of secret money.
And the crazy part is one of the soldiers, once again, they're like 70 years old now, 80 years old, but he talked about how while he was at Edgewood, he was basically taken in by what he thought was a CIA honeypot. So it was a female that was at a bar, and he says that she drugged him. It was a bar right outside of the base, and he was drugged, and she had him do what sounded like some weird sex stuff that he would never do. He was like, I'm a good old Southern boy, never would have done anything like that, but like something was in my drink and like something weird happened to me that night. And it's a very similar story to what was happening during MKUltra, where they were using, quote unquote honeypots to drug people and have them do weird sex stuff, take pictures of it and then use it as blackmail for foreign leaders.
You want to give it a rough explanation of what a honeypot is for our uninitiated?
Yeah, it's basically a very attractive person that draws you in, and they're actually the CIA plant or whatever it is. And that's when they lace your drink, something like that. There was another test the CIA was doing at Edgewood where they were trying to take BZ, which is this highly potent chemical compound that the effects could last for weeks, and then actually put it on someone's hand so that they could touch a foreign leader and then have that foreign leader go crazy and potentially be institutionalized, because this is an effect that lasts for weeks.
Because they wouldn't know what it was that was going on.
Exactly. We just have this foreign leader who starts going insane and they have to get rid of him. So if you're trying to take someone out of the equation, then that was a potential way of doing it. Transdermal BZ.
God damn, dude. We just evil people.
Very, very evil.
This is insane. All right, keep on. Like, most of us, especially in the, that are interested in conspiracy and knowing more about our government, know about MKUltra. I've never heard of Project Edgewood.
Yeah.
This is crazy.
It's pretty crazy. So let's get into the actual drugs themselves, right? So where did we start? LSD, the classic, right?
Yeah, classico.
Yeah, and remember at the time, LSD not well known.
Yeah, the one of the first ones that they looked at that was fairly successful was LSD, and that was called Agent K. And that one they did a lot of experimentation on in the 1950s into the 1960s, calling it a discoordination agent. And it was roughly as powerful as sarin nerve gas. The problem with it, though, is that the Army would say, the military folks in the Army would say that, hey, hallucinating is not the same thing as incapable of fighting.
So we started with LSD, but it just was not taking people out enough. Because they were seeing stuff, but they still had their capacities about them.
Right. Yeah. You don't like lose your motor function. You can still somewhat reason and stuff like that after you take LSD. But you're not like, it wouldn't stop if you had like, let's say Russians at the time, a battlefield of Russians, you know, you just now have hallucinogenic topped up Russians. You don't have, you know, a bunch of incapacitated, semi-unconscious bros just strode across the battlefield.
And, you know, another problem with that, too, is that could potentially make the situation worse if you still have a high powered weapon and your, you know, physical capacities and you're hallucinating. Something really bad could happen on the battlefield.
Yeah.
And the way that they were actually giving out these drugs is that they would aerosolize it, right? And they would have these face masks lined up with seats in front of them. And then you would just sit down and then they would have you put your face against this mask and then just breathe in. And they would just pump you full of LSD. So I've never tried LSD. If anyone out there has experimented with LSD previously, it is so much more than any human should ever ingest. Right. Because it would last for multiple days because they were just pumped full of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a really brutal amount. So, you know,
well, you never aerosol it either. Yeah. So I can only imagine, you know, it gets immediately into your lungs. And, you know, for people who know, your lungs are a receptacle much better than anything else. Other like intravenous injection is the only way that is a more immediate, stronger effect than aerosoling.
Yeah, going through the lungs, you know, it's immediately in the bloodstream. And the other thing about this too is that, you know, flashbacks, which is where you've taken a hallucinogenic drug and, you know, later down the line, you know, a couple days, even years later, you get hallucinogenic effects again, right? And it's just like this residual thing in your brain. They're pretty rare, right? They don't happen a lot, but it happens a ton with these Edgewood veterans because of how much they were given and the damage that it did to their brain.
Well, right, because how a flashback works is that these chemical compounds, it's hard for our body to metabolize it. And so it then gets concentrated into our like spinal cord, into our nervous system, where the chemicals collect for whatever reason. I think it has to do with the atomic compounds.
Some science shit.
Right. But that's why we get flashbacks.
Yeah,
it's because these chemicals attach to our nervous system.
Yeah, and when you're pumped full of these chemicals, you're gonna have more in your system.
Right. You're gonna have way more than you know the guy who casually takes a dab of LSD.
Yeah. So we didn't just do LSD though. We also tried things like PCP, Chris.
That's insane.
Or angel dust.
Well, I'm going to assume that they were like, oh, wow, PCP is even worse than LSD.
That's pretty much what happened.
And then another agent that came out that was in a crash program called New Year was phencyclidine or Agent SN, which we now call the street drug PCP or angel dust. That was another one, but it wasn't really potent enough to be weaponized.
Now, the other problem they had with PCP on the fact that you couldn't weaponize it or aerosolize it in a can and have it thrown out in the battlefield or dropped from a plane, right?
Right.
Is that it made the soldiers freaking buck wild, dude.
Yeah, dude. It would do the exact opposite of what you want them to do. You become extremely aggressive.
Yeah, and there was one of the video clips because the military made a ton of marketing videos to sell to the higher up of their brass, right?
Oh my God. Can you imagine what these marketing videos looked like?
Oh, you can watch them now.
You can watch them
You
now?
can watch them, yeah. If you watch the
Oh,
documentary,
man.
you can watch them. It's the classic 1950s, like guy behind a desk, explaining what happened, and then he looks to his right, and then there's
Yeah.
TV, and they zoom in, and then they show the experiments happening of them drugging our own soldiers.
Oh my God, dude, these people are psychopaths.
They're psychopaths. So in one of the clips, it was a soldier that had taken PCP, and he was sitting there talking to a superior officer and just like running in place, like just spastically. And he was like, "How do you feel?" And the soldier was like, "I feel like I could run 100 miles right now. I could do it. I can go right now." They were so wired on. It's like Nazis taking meth, dude. You don't want that. It's bad.
This is insane.
Yeah.
This is absolutely insane.
So LSD didn't work. PCP didn't work.
Yeah. So there's got to be a third thing, right?
There's got to be another thing. So they landed on BZ.
To be weaponized. So the one that they finally came up with was an agent called BZ, 3-quinaclidinol benzylate. And that one, the identity of that chemical was a secret all the way up until the 1970s.
So super secret BZ, once again, we were using it on people. And not only did they not know what it was, didn't know what the effects were, the compound itself was top secret.
Right.
And no one knew about it.
Right.
So what are some of the differences between LSD and BZ?
I was going to say, I have no idea what BZ is.
Yeah, I didn't either before researching this.
LSD can be used as a recreational drug, and it has been since the 60s, causing hallucinations but BZ is a very different drug. I read somewhere that it's about 100 times more powerful than LSD. And it caused what was called delirium. Delirium is different than hallucinating. Delirium is a nightmarish experience. There would never be, no one would ever take BZ recreational.
So this is like the scarecrow drug.
This is literally the Scarecrow may have been inspired from Edgewood. I'm not certain, but it very well could be. But it's the Scarecrow drug from Batman.
That's insane. Dude, they almost certainly took BZ from this. Or, I mean, I guess it could be like they're like, what if LSD gave you nightmares?
Yeah.
And the military was like, yeah, we can make that.
Well, and it's the same exact thing, because when you do watch the experiments, like in Batman, people would get dosed with this and they would just be curled up in a ball, terrified. Right. That's what happens when you take BZ. There were, grown soldiers sitting there like wrapped up in the fetal position in their bed because of the delirium that they're experiencing. And it lasted for days or weeks at a time.
That's horrifying.
You were trapped inside of it.
You were trapped inside of a nightmare for days or weeks.
Yes.
Dude, we are disgusting species.
And there were soldiers, and this is in the video clips of them like on day 2, and they're like, "Take me out of this, make this stop."
Yeah.
But
and they're like, "Oh, we can't.
We can't. We dosed you.
Yeah.
You got to write it out."
Wow.
So, and that's actually one of the big things, is that we broke the international standards for testing in human experiments that was set up after World War II and what the Nazis did.
Right.
Because what was said was, and like the standard that was set was that you have to have patients who are willing. They know what would potentially happen. You're going to try and limit any potential harm. And if they ever want this to stop, it will stop immediately.
The American Empire has never cared about international standards or laws, though.
No, we don't. We don't.
Yeah. We literally took Nazis who we had just condemned and we're like, those things you were doing for Hitler? Come do that for us now.
Do it here.
Do it here. We'll forgive you. And now we'll do it against our own soldiers like you were going to do against our soldiers anyways.
Yeah. And that's literally what happened here.
My God, dude, this is an unbelievable story. All right. So it doesn't get worse. What else do we have here?
So let's get into what the experiments actually looked like, right? So what were they doing with these soldiers?
Yeah.
James Ketchum followed suit with doing some experiments in something called Project Dork out at Dugway Proving Grounds. They did mock combat simulations out there. The drug itself, BZ, they exposed them to an aerosol of it at Dugway Proving Ground, and the drug itself, it takes like a half hour to about 12 hours to take effect. but it also lasts. The symptoms from it will last for 1 to 5 days afterwards. And they ran these soldiers through mock combat, guard duty, and other things, and a lot of various tests of mental faculties, things like that.
So basically what they were doing was taking them out to a base, like out in the desert, right? And then having them do mock combat. So this occurred in stages. They first started with drugging soldiers at Edgewood Arsenal. And it was just a standard drug, drug them, put them in a little room, a padded room a lot of times, and just see what happened to them.
Yeah, just see what happens. Right.
Then they would drug them and then put them in a room with other soldiers. And then they would have a chemical alarm go off. And they have to put their chemical suits on. And they would test how quickly the normal soldiers did it as their baseline against the drug soldiers. So they had a control, right? And then their experimental test. And then after all that, they're like, okay, this is working. We got to put them in the field and then see what happens in the field.
Right.
And then they started drugging them in the field using weaponized versions of BZ and then having them do mock scenarios. And the mock scenarios are terrifying because these soldiers can barely stand. They don't know where they are. They're just like walking around aimlessly, or they're just, in bed terrified is basically what was happening.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is insane.
Yeah. And after all this, BZ was the drug that caused the most damage to the veterans.
Yeah, right.
And most of the vets that I spoke to who still wake up with nightmares have flashbacks. I mean, we're talking 40, 50 years later. Most of them that I spoke to were involved with the experiments with BZ.
So this BZ stuff was what was really destroying their brains.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like the concentrations they were giving them, I mean, yeah, this stuff probably attached to their nervous system and has just never left.
Yeah.
And even if it had, even if your body does get rid of it, the psychological damage that happens, I mean, being in a days or weeks long delirium where your worst nightmares are coming at you, my God, I mean, just the damage that would happen to you psychologically is mind-boggling.
Well, one of the interesting things about when they interviewed Dr. Ketchum for the documentary, and they sat down, they did like a 2-day interview with him, is that what he said was, yes, they had nightmare scenarios, but a lot of times when they came out of it, they wouldn't remember anything.
Really? So it had that kind of effect on them.
Yeah, a lot of times they wouldn't remember what had happened. They were told to do tasks. They didn't remember the tasks, things like that. Although some of them did have pretty strong memories of what had occurred. So one of the guys who got drugged, he thought that there were maggots under his skin.
Oh,
so
God.
He went to the bathroom, found a razor, broke the razor open, and then started slicing his skin to get the maggots out.
Oh,
and then,
God.
Yeah, when he went back and it was just all bloody, he told him that like he like slipped and the razor cut him or something like that.
Right.
But he was like, I was trying to dig the maggots out from under my skin.
Oh my God.
This was the type of stuff that they were saying.
This is messed up.
It's insane. Now, once again, Chris, we mentioned the CIA.
Yes.
So what were they doing there?
What we discovered in our research and within the deposition itself was that there was crossover, that the CIA was using Army volunteers for their own purposes. And they were interested in BZ especially because they saw this as a weapon that could be used to take down world leaders, let's say. If you would dose someone, they could seem insane or crazy, and so they saw this as really a potential for a clandestine operation.
So I spoiled that clip a little bit, but that is just completely wild to me.
Yeah.
That this is a thing that you want to use to dose world leaders.
Right. Yeah. And I wonder if they almost certainly did dose people with BZ, and we just don't know about it.
Well, I know that they were definitely trying to dose Fidel Castro at some point with something.
Oh, well, dude, they tried a myriad of things. And this is, there's this weird dichotomy, right, with the CIA, because like they are evil bastards, but they're also like incompetent in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I mean, there was like 70 assassination attempts against Fidel Castro, all of which failed. And so, I mean, it is kind of a weird, they're evil bastards, yet also somewhat incompetent.
That's one of the things that I always try and kind of hedge whenever talking about the conspiracies that involve the intelligence community, because a lot of times I feel like people frame it as they are almost this like all-powerful, all-knowing being. And it, like you said, yes, they are very evil. They do really bad things. They know a lot of information, but they also suck at their job in the end.
Yeah, they're also terrible because they probably see themselves that way, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we're omnipotent, omnipresent, right? But when you have that much, when you think that highly of yourself, you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah. And they're also part of a giant bureaucracy of a bunch of like mid-level managers that are all just kind of covering their own ass. Like in the end, it's like any other giant bureaucracy, be it a corporation or government. They're just kind of shitty at what they do.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
they are sociopaths. Don't get me wrong about that.
Yeah.
Like these people are absolutely insane. They're just also incompetent because you have a whole hierarchy of sociopaths who at the end of the day, the bottom line is, what is this going to do for me?
Mm-hmm. And speaking of sociopaths, Chris, I promised you Nazis.
You've promised me some Nazis.
There were Nazis at Edgewood.
Yeah, of course there were.
Bringing over German scientists to help us with our nerve gas program was very important.
Yeah, there was two particular chemists who came over as chemical warfare advisors, Otto, Ambrose, and Fritz, Hoffman. And these were Nazi scientists, we could say. And they were experimenting with more lethal gases like sarin.
So we brought Nazi scientists over. This was part of Project Paperclip. Same thing that happened with, was it Werner von Braun, who was brought to Huntsville, Alabama to build rockets. He was the one who built the V2 back in Germany. We were bringing their sarin chemists over to make sarin for us, as well as other chemical compounds.
Not surprised at all.
Yeah.
Not surprised at all, dude. It really is incredible how much propaganda we put out there about how terrible the Nazis were, how terrible their science were, or their scientists were, how terrible the Holocaust was. And it's like, we literally took the scientists who did the Holocaust, gave them high-level, top-secret jobs in the U.S. government.
And then said experiment on our people.
And then experiment on Americans.
Yeah.
I mean, sociopathic, dude. Absolutely sociopathic.
And that's the government, baby.
Well, it's funny because it's taken so long for a lot of this information to disseminate into our populace. I feel like there were definitely people back in the 60s and 70s who talked about a lot of this, but it really is the internet age that has gotten a lot of this information out here, dude. And you are seeing the absolute crumbling of the American sense and American belief in our government. And rightfully so, right? I mean, the military today cannot recruit anybody. And again, there's a very good reason for that. It's this stuff.
You want to know another funny thing? I completely agree with everything you just said, especially things like this and like why you can't trust the military. Another big reason why they're saying military recruitment is so low is TikTok.
Well, again, it's TikTok is probably their soldiers being like, this is what my day looks like. And it's awful.
Exactly. Because a bunch of the TikTokers are soldiers or cops, right? It's people who just kind of sit around all day. It's 95% nothing, 5% something crazy, probably.
Right.
And they're saying that kids are looking at that and being like, oh, that's being a soldier. It's not the cool stuff in the movies or video games. I don't want to do that. And they are enjoying it.
It's funny.
I love that idea.
It really is funny because, you know, in the Soviet Union, right before the Soviet Union fell, there was what was called glasnost and perestroika. And those were the airing of grievances, essentially, the airing of secret information that the government had kept secret from the populace for decades. And like, that was a top-down policy. This is like a bottom-up policy that's happening in America, and it really is fascinating to watch it happen in real time.
Yeah.
Like, it is a weird awakening in the American populace of, oh wow, our government is full of terrible people who do terrible things. And like this, like, oh, you know, we got to do everything to help Americans is bullshit. Like, they will do terrible experiments on us. They will do terrible things to their own populace.
Yeah.
You know, and these are for the most part volunteers, people who joined the military and like some kind of high ideal for the most part. And they took advantage of that.
Yeah, they did.
And they didn't just take advantage of it. They didn't help them after they did all this terrible stuff to them.
Well, and I think that's a really important note to kind of cap off this episode as well, is that all the vets wanted to know was what they were dosed with so that they could seek treatment.
Right.
And for decades, the military withheld their medical records, wouldn't tell them what they were dosed with, wouldn't tell them what happened, and wouldn't let them talk about it. So they couldn't even say something happened to me and I need treatment, because just giving any sort of indication that they were dosed with something by the military would put them in a military prison and they wouldn't be able to get benefits at all. So it was a catch-22 situation that the military put them in. And another important note too that Dr. Ketchum talks about was that they originally had told them that they were going to follow up with them to make sure that they're doing okay, right? Make sure that they could actually have some, you know, post-evaluation testing of what had occurred. And then, you know, the funding disappeared and they didn't do any follow-ups with these soldiers.
Right. Of course not, dude.
No
Typical
follow-ups.
government bureaucracy.
Yeah. So nothing was done afterwards either to say like, okay, you know, those people we dosed with a bunch of drugs, let's see if they're doing okay mentally. One of the soldiers, a few years after being experimented on at Edgewood, he murdered his wife and then shot himself.
Right.
And now, was that because of Edgewood? Don't know, but it is a possibility that it was the damage that was done to his brain that led to an event like that, because he was tested on with BC.
Well, this was you know, there's the conspiracy theory that a lot of the serial killers in the 70s and 80s were MKULTRA experiments, or probably these Project Edgewood experiments.
Yeah. Well, it was shown that the Unabomber was a part of MKULTRA.
Right.
Yeah. So that could happen. And Chris, it's actually a great segue to our last clip. A little lighter, a little weirder. I think maybe a caller called in and said that his cousin was experimented on, and I just was not expecting this.
Okay.
Thanks for taking my call. I had a question for your guests. Are they familiar with any of the CIA programs that were conducted on students at colleges like Stanford? One of my cousins was actually affected by this, and according to my family, he was never the same afterward, and he actually became a cult leader.
I saw that. I was like, what?
Whoa.
This guy's
dude, Stanford, any of these Ivy League schools, dude, like, be real skeptical before you apply to them, dude, because again, they will come after you, dude.
Well, here's the trick. Don't sign up for any experiments.
No experiments.
Just like the military. They're testing something, don't go.
Don't go.
Yeah.
Don't go. Next thing you'll know, you'll be in the Stanford prison experiment where you're getting beaten by your other fellow students.
Next thing you know, you're Ted Kaczynski or apparently a cult leader.
Yeah.
Which I want to know more about. This guy did not expand upon what happened. I am so curious what happened with his cousin and what this cult was.
Well, yeah. It was probably messed up.
Yeah, and the answer that the directors gave was basically, we know that they did experiment with drugs on college campuses. I don't know specifically about what happened in Stanford, but I can almost guarantee you that they were experimenting on people at Stanford because they were doing it everywhere else. Well, Chris, I think that is the end of today's show on Project Edgewood and the Dr. Delirium film, which you can find on Discovery Plus. So go check that out. It was actually
we'll put a link up to it on the show notes.
So, Chris, 1 to 5 tabs of LSD. How do you rate the Dr. Delirium story?
Oh, dude, 5 tabs of LSD. Like, not only do we have the evidence that it happened, but like stuff like this is still happening.
Yeah.
Like, let's not beat around the bush here. The one that I always think of is like the opium epidemic. Like, that was a sanctioned thing that they did on our populace. Like, everyone knew what Purdue Pharma was doing, that they had these doctors prescribing to towns thousands of pills per person, essentially. And like, this is sanctioned. This is sanctioned by higher ups. Our leadership is absolutely evil, and they've become only more corrupted since the 1940s. And so this is just, this is one example of thousands. I've never heard of this project. Didn't know anything about it. How many more of these are out there?
Yeah.
How many more insane things do we not know our government did? And we may never know that our government did.
I think one of the, and to give my rating as well, 5 out of 5 tabs of LSD for certain. I think one of the really interesting things about this particular case is that it is one of the scenarios, unlike anything that happened with MKUltra, that is very well documented. We finally have the medical records from these vets. We have the films. We have the archival footage of all this occurring. One of the reasons why is because Dr. Ketchum, the guy who ran this, really believed what he was doing, and he saved all the files. When Edgewood shut down these experiments, he walked out with all the videotapes and all the files, and he lets people see them because he agrees with what he did.
Well, he's bragging about it.
Yeah.
Right. He was like, look at the great work that I did.
Yeah. And it stands as a proof point of the U.S. government will do this to our people. We won't help them afterwards. Yep. And it also points to Nazi and spook involvement in these tests. Right. And all of this is documented. It's all on the record. It's all come out in court in civil cases and through this documentary, which is definitely worth checking out. So all in all, terrible, terrible time today, Chris. I'm going to say that this is much less fun than a Bigfoot story, but I think it's in a lot of ways more important because I think the impact is much greater. So felt like we should cover it.
Yeah. And this is that weird, there's like that weird realm in the conspiracy world where it's like, is what, the difference between history and conspiracy, right? This is history, but it's like conspiratorial history. Like, can you imagine in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, these like soldiers trying to tell somebody like, these Nazi scientists were giving me this crazy drug that gave me weird, delirious nightmares for days. I mean, the average American would look at that person being like, dude, you're going crazy. You're going insane. You need to be committed.
Yeah, that's spot on, because some of these guys did try to tell their doctors back in the day what had happened to try and seek help and say, I was drugged by the U.S. military and, I'm having these nightmares. I think it's related. And the doctors didn't believe them. And their response was, the U.S. government doesn't test on our own soldiers like that. Like
our government would never do that to us.
They thought that these soldiers were like mentally ill or making it up. And they were not. And it's been chilling. It's crazy because you can actually see some of the guys who are being interviewed and then their clips back to back in the documentary. Right. So like when they were younger. So pretty brutal stuff. But that has been the show today, Chris. If you like Coast to Coast PM. Please give us 5 stars on Apple. Share it with a friend. Shout off the rooftop, whatever it is. Help us, build a little base here, baby, which getting a lot of new listens lately, which is pretty exciting. So we really appreciate all the newcomers. Hope you like the show and keep coming back. We will be dropping episodes every Thursday. My name is Paul. My name is Chris, one of your hosts, and have a great rest of your day.
All conspiracy, all the time. Later.